My colleague Georgia Will said if Democrats don't win this election, they should find another country. There's something to that. When you look at the underlying structure of the election, it should be a Democratic year. The ideal Democratic candidate is a stick with a sign that says Democratic candidate on it. Because if you ask voters simply in a generic way, do you want a Republican or a Democratic president, at least until a couple of weeks ago, it was a very solid and consistent Democratic lead. I'm glad John raised the race issue because that is an imponderable, and it operates in an interesting way because I think it operates very differently among voters under 45 than among voters, say, over 50. And we don't quite know how much that is, but clearly voters under 45, for a whole variety of reasons, are much more comfortable with racial diversity. Now, as I believe strongly that we are not a racist country, A. B, this is all operating at the margins, because there are some people who may vote against Barack Obama because he is an African American who never would have voted for any other Democrat. So, in a sense, those voters are politically irrelevant. The relevant voters are voters who might have voted for another Democrat are somehow pushed away from Obama because of their racial feelings and that they live in certain key states. So we're actually, I think, talking about, in terms of racial politics, a small number of voters who either will or will not be significant, partly depending on these mobilization efforts, because the electorate is going to change. I have no doubt that more young people are going to vote, not just because of Barack Obama, but there's a 4-year trend now of expanding participation by voters under 30. And I have no doubt that there will be a much larger African American participation. I was down in North Carolina, and somebody made a very interesting point that in a lot of general elections in African American legislative districts, there is virtually no opposition, so there is nothing in a local race to push African Americans to the polls. Well, there is at the top of the ticket this time. So, and then, not only that, but you also have very active efforts to create a bigger African American vote. So there will be a kind of counterbalance to whatever racial voting there is. But lastly, John McCain may be George Bush in the eyes of the Obama campaign in terms of his voting record and his views on a whole series of important issues. But it is important that biologically he is not George Bush. Bush's name is not on the ballot. And that there was one poll I saw that Obama would beat Bush by 20 points. And so what we don't know is how successful McCain can be in disentangling himself from Bush. And he made a very audacious move. I decided that McCain could write a memoir of this campaign called The Audacity of Chutzpah. He made an audacious move where he suddenly went from being the candidate of experience before the Republican convention to the candidate of change after the Republican convention. And either he makes that work or he doesn't.